The canvas of dusk draped Meereen in molten gold, a languid heat shimmering above pale walls that still bore the scars of rebellion. In the distance, the Great Pyramid's shadow reached like a dark spear across the lower streets, but inside Daznak's pit the air thrummed with feverish anticipation. Merchants hawked honey-spiced locusts, pit fighters oiled their scarred limbs, and freedmen crowded tier upon tier, their cheers rising in uneven waves that smelled of sweat, slaked ale, and hope starved thin by siege. Daenerys Targaryen felt that hope pressing upon her shoulders like an invisible yoke. Draped in pale lavender silk, she sat upon the wooden throne hastily erected above the fighting sands. The heavy noon sun had ripened into late afternoon, yet its glare still made her squint. Beside her, Hisdar zo Lorak fidgeted, king in thin title only, gaudy rings clacking against one another as he applauded a match whose outcome Daenerys had scarcely watched. Her mind wandered instead to the ships lurking beyond the gullet, to the pale mare plague spreading among the camps, to dragons she could not cage and allies she could not trust. The drums below rolled like distant thunder, and the sands swallowed another fighter's blood. A leather-clad herald proclaimed the next combatants in a booming, rehearsed voice. Yet the roar that answered felt different, hungry, frantic. Across the arena floor, iron gates groaned open to unveil a monstrous bull grown near twice the size of any she had seen in Westeros. Its hide, mottled black and red, glistened with sacred oils. Opposite, a lithe pit fighter bowed low, twin Arak blades catching sunlight in arcs of bright steel. But Daenerys barely registered their names. A dull ache throbbed behind her eyes, a premonition that something vast was coiling just beyond sight. Above the clamor, a solitary note pierced the air, low, resonant, older than speech. It rolled through the stadium like a living tide, quivering through stone, stirring every watcher's bones. Conversations stilled. Even the bull's stamping ceased, nostrils flaring as if scenting something it could not place. The note deepened, turning metallic, then reached a second register that rattled banners along the parapets. Daenerys stood despite herself. The horn, somewhere in the tiers, a figure cloaked in shimmering midnight scales lowered a massive black horn from weathered lips. A thing banded in Valyrian bronze, etched with glyphs that seemed to crawl beneath the skin of the metal. 3 blows in legend-bound dragons. 3. She had read the tale 100 times and dismissed it as the fever dream of mad priests. Yet one sound alone clutched her heart in fear. Across the sky a shadow rippled, blotting the sun for an instant. Drogon. He came on sable wings wide as a war galley's mast, firelight rippling beneath obsidian scales. His roar broke against the city roofs, sending flocks of gulls scattering in ragged panic. He banked once, twice, then dove toward the arena. The crowd's terror warped into feral delight. They had hungered for spectacle, and the gods, capricious as ever, had delivered. Drogon crashed onto the fighting sands in a cyclone of ash and sand. Pit fighters fled. The bull bellowed and charged, horns lowered. Drogon's jaws snapped shut around bone and sinew. Blood misted the air in a crimson halo. Cheers rose, but Daenerys tasted only iron. Then the horn sounded again. Drogon's head jerked as though yanked by an invisible chain. His crimson eyes, so quick to find her always, searched the terraces, then glazed, pupils contracting to pinpricks. The air trembled. A third blast, shrill as a lover's scream yet cavernous, resounded. Dragons were born of fire and storm, but this note spoke to something deeper, a resonance older than Valyria itself. Drogon's wings sagged. Smoke curled weakly from his nostrils. Daenerys felt the bond between them tear like silk. Panic welled, raw, absolute. "No," she whispered, but the word drowned beneath the horn's dying echo. She sprang forward, heedless of Hisdar's cry, and scrambled down rickety steps toward the arena rails. Below, Drogon staggered, talons gouging packed sand. Another figure emerged onto the sands. Tall, broad-shouldered, clad in sea-green scale and black leather sewn with pale hands. Some fresh, some tanned, dangling like obscene trophies. His dark beard forked upon a grin too white, too hungry.
Euron gradioi.
Euron lifted the horn a final time, though no breath followed. Scald lines scored his lips where Valyrian metal had bitten. He raised his free hand instead, fingers curled in command. Drogon obeyed. A beast who had never known rains folded his wings and crawled like a whipped hound to the Kraken's feet. Screams replaced cheers. Men trampled one another in the tears. Daenerys vaulted the railing. Sand burned her feet through thin slippers as she stumbled toward her dragon. Drogon! She reached, but Drogon's eyes. I know those eyes. I nursed him on charred mutton. I sang to him beneath a bleeding star. They stared past her, lifeless as garnet glass. Euron's shadow fell across her. Beautiful, isn't he? His voice rasped, still raw from the horn's dark magic. A gift from the drowned god, for a new world's drowning. She drew herself upright, sweat and sand staining her silks. Release him. I think not. The world has had queens enough. His grin widened. But a kraken astride a dragon? That, my silver queen, is a song for deep waters. He stepped closer. The horn's glyphs pulsed faintly, as if drinking the last of Drogon's will. Daenerys lunged, seizing a fallen spear. She thrust. Euron sidestepped, laughing, and backhanded her with the horn's rim. Stars erupted behind her eyes. She tasted blood. Drogon's tail twitched but did not rise to defend. Euron turned to Hizdar's dais. Meereen belongs to me now, he declared, voice carrying through the panicked exodus. Send word across earth and sea. The dragon of the great grass sea kneels to Euron Crow's eye. With a yank on a makeshift chain looped through Drogon's great iron collar, when had that been clasped? He mounted the dragon's neck. Black wings unfurled. The sandstorm of his takeoff hurled Daenerys to her knees. Drogon, enslaved, rose upon a thermal and wheeled north toward the gullet where silence and smoke awaited. When the dust settled, only broken bodies, shattered pillars, and the stink of burnt flesh remained. Daenerys staggered upright, dizziness rippling through her skull. The arena echoed with distant cries. Barristan Selmy vaulted from the stands, white cloak tattered, blood matting silver hair. He reached her side. Your Grace, I must follow, she rasped, voice raw. He has Drogon. Your Grace, Meereen is breaking apart. The sons of the Harpies strike the streets. Hizdar's guards are in flight. Then we leave them to their war. Her gaze fixed on the vanishing dot that was Drogon, chained now to a monstrous will. Find me a horse, Barristan. Everything else can burn. Night bled into Meereen without torches. Flames guttered through the city as freedman and slaver alike clashed in twisting alleys. Above, the remaining pyramids loomed like tomb markers, the promise of a civilization that could no longer decide who owned whom. Daenerys moved through it cloaked in rags, a brass lamp tucked low beneath her hood, Jorah Mormont at her flank and Barristan scouting ahead. Grey Worm had been carried from the pit half-conscious, the blood around his wounds refusing to clot. Missandei guided the Unsullied as best she could, but the narrow streets swallowed formations whole. Meereen was lost. They reached a sally gate on the city's western wall, half hidden by toppled scaffolding. Beyond lay parched hills rolling toward green plains that met the sea. Wind carried the smell of brine and distant rain, storm winds summoned by Drogon's spiraling passage hours before. Daenerys paused, looking back once. Fires stitched lines of orange across stone. Screams lifted to a sky empty of dragons. Her people, her city, and yet the bond in her heart screamed louder. Drogon. Jorah wrapped a tattered cloak around her shoulders. We ride hard and quiet. I know a smuggler's path to the Skahazaden. From there we find a ship, she finished. If Euron heads north, he must sail by Valyria or through the Stepstones. We will need speed and coin. Her voice hardened. And sorcery stronger than his horn. Barristan nodded grimly. Kartha's warlocks know ancient leashes. So do the Ashai. We may beg their lore or steal it. They slipped into the darkness, hooves muffled, hearts clenched. Behind them, the last queen of Meereen vanished amid a roar none heard. for in the conflagration of a dying city, even angels might burn unheard. Atop Drogon, Euron tasted godhood. Wind tore through his beard as black wings beat thunder beneath moonlight. Below, the Iron Fleet's masts pricked the waves like the quills of some vast sea beast. Sailors gaped as their captain descended upon a dragon wreathed in ember smoke. Drogon landed upon the deck of silence, white-painted figurehead screaming voicelessly, timbers groaning under impossible weight. Euron slid down warm scales and clasped a ringing iron chain that linked horn to collar. Drogon snarled but crouched. Victarion Greyjoy waited, eyes wide as hurricane skies. "Brother," he breathed. "What devilry?" Euron pressed a burned finger to his lips. "Not devilry, salvation. With this beast I will rend the world like wet parchment. First Slaver's Bay, then Old Valyria, then the Seven itself. Kneel or be kindling." Victarion knelt. All knelt. The Ironborn bowed to no man, but dragons were not men. Moonlight glinted off Drogon's eyes, an ember struggling in soot. Somewhere deep inside, a flicker of wild defiance battled the horn's chains. But for now, the Kraken reigned. Dawn found Daenerys crossing barren scrub where thorn bushes snagged her skirts. In a gullied ravine, they discovered a water seller's camp abandoned save for a dying goat. She drank sparingly, dust lining her throat. Each heartbeat measured distance, how far Drogon could fly, how swiftly Euron might master him. She recalled Kaith's warning beneath Astapor's moonlit walls. To go north, you must journey south. To touch the light, you must pass beneath the shadow. The prophecy had coiled itself about her life like ivy. Perhaps now its thorns would bleed her truth. Yora returned from scouting with news. The Giscari legions were marching downriver, emboldened by the city's anarchy. At their rear trailed a flotilla bearing black sails sewn with red krakens. Within days, Meereen would know a conqueror fiercer than slavers. Daenerys squared her shoulders. "Then we steal the conqueror's fire." She touched her breast, where beneath thin cloth her skin still tingled from Drogon's absent presence. "We free my child." 2 days later, on the deck of silence as it carved foam toward Valyria, Euron stood before Drogon, brandishing the horn. Burned scars spiderwebbed his face, yet madness lent them a crown's glamour. He raised a gloved hand heavy with strange gems. "Obey!" He hissed in high Valyrian older than the freehold, words curling like incense. Drogon's pupils vanished to thin slits. A single gout of flame churned above the mast, yet Euron laughed and stroked the dragon's snout, as one might soothe a bridled stallion. On the forecastle, Carrick the Hagseer watched, eyes milky with clouded prophecy. "The waves speak," she croaked. "A woman of storm comes with no chain but love. She shall snatch the fire from your lips, crow's eye."
Euron licked cracked lips.
"Then I shall tear out hers." Thunderheads massed along the horizon, distant, ominous. Drogon's wings rustled, taste of rain on the wind, memory of freedom thrumming like a broken harp string. Yet the chain remained. At Volantis, Daenerys bartered her remaining gold rings for passage on the Feathered Serpent, a slender Carthene clipper famed for outracing slave galleys. Its captain, Zandacuo, eyed her ragged dress, then her eyes, amethyst, unbowed. Word had already spread of a black dragon bound to a Kraken lord. Temples whispered that the world's new god sailed east. But gold still spoke louder. They set sail under moonless night, Barristan training sun-bleached sailors with battered spears, Yora poring over chipped maps. Amid coils of rope, Daenerys traced Valyrian glyphs remembered from dusty scrolls, searching for sigils of unbinding. Viserys had forced her to memorize lineage and law. Now she combed memory for scraps of dragon lore beyond mere songs. She dreamt of Drogon nightly, great wings heavy with chains, eyes weeping molten tears. Xanda's ship skirted smoking Valyrian straits days later, azure waves turning oily under a sky bruised purple. Broken towers jutted from the sea like jagged ribs. Lightning forked across bruised clouds, and the Feathered Serpent's crew muttered prayers. Daenerys stood at the prow, salt spray cold on her face, and felt the air hum with dormant power. Somewhere within that doom-shrouded archipelago, Dragonbinder had been forged. Perhaps within its ruins another key lay waiting. But Euron was not fool enough to brave Valeria's ghost fires with a dragon under yoke. Scouts reported his fleet veering north toward the Stepstones, bound for Westeros, a return crowned in flame. The race began. On Silence, Euron tested Drogon against a doomed Rhoynar cog, its hold swollen with wool and women. Drogon's breath bathed the vessel in emerald conflagration. Wildfire seed Euron had scattered upon its decks. The sea hissed, steam swirling as bodies blackened. Drogon roared, a sound hollow, forced, yet still enough to freeze the blood of all who witnessed. Euron watched, enthralled. His dream of a throne forged of coral and charred bone glittered in the flames. Yet that night, as Kraken sailors sang salt-washed shanties, Drogon's head swung seaward. A single plaintive call rumbled from within, low, grieving. The chain vibrated. The horn's glyphs dimmed, as though some deeper resonance answered from beyond the water's edge. Euron slept with the horn against his bare chest, terrified someone might steal it, yet more terrified that it might falter. Dreams plagued him. A silver queen riding a storm of ash, a red comet splitting his black crown, and a dragon unbound turning its jaws upon a kraken cast adrift. He woke screaming. Weeks passed. Storms raked the narrow sea, but the feathered serpent danced atop waves like a blade skimming silk. Daenerys stood braced at the bow when first they glimpsed the Iron Fleet, a smudge of black hulls arrayed beneath the chalk-white cliffs of Massey's Hook. Above them wheeled a dot that burned against dawn's pink. Drogon. She exhaled, a trembling sigh between pain and awe. Every instinct urged her to call, but Barristan grasped her shoulder. Wait, we need the sorcery. Below decks, the Red Priestess Kinvara awaited. Summoned from Volantis through Xanda's network, Kinvara had arrived at the last tide. Claiming fire had shown her this path. She brandished a bronze medallion bearing R'hlloreth's rising sun sigil. Within the hold, candles danced crimson. Your dragon's mind is wrapped in shadow forged by dead sorcerers, she murmured, voice echoing off timbers. Yet shadow is banished by light. You must be the light, Daenerys Stormborn. She offered a vial of oily crimson liquid. Blood of my blood, drink, and the dragon within you shall roar louder than the horns lie. Daenerys took it. Memories of pyres, of the fire that had hatched her children, flickered behind her eyes. She drank. Heat unfurled in her veins like molten gold. The ship seemed to dissolve, replaced by endless sky. She saw Drogon chained to an obsidian pillar, screaming voicelessly. She saw Euron clutching a horn that bled smoke, glyphs pulsing like a dying heartbeat. And she saw herself, hair whipped white by wind, standing between storm and kraken. Kinvara's voice threaded through the vision. Call him home. They came upon Silence at dusk. Mist blanketed the sea, muffling oar splashes as feathered serpent glided closer. Barristan led a boarding party of unsullied survivors, their shields painted black to drink starlight. Daenerys climbed the rigging, heart hammering. Above the masts, she whispered Drogon's name. Not aloud, but in that private room of the soul where rider and dragon were one. The horn sounded. Once, twice. The third blow stuck in Euron's throat as smoke hissed from the bronze. The glyphs flared, then flickered, as if doused. Drogon's head lifted. His eyes, dull moments before, flashed crimson. Beyond the rails, Daenerys stepped from the shadows, wind tearing back her hood to reveal silver gold hair. Moonlight painted her face bloodless, but her eyes burned. Drogon, she breathed. The chain snapped like brittle twig. Metal clanged off deck planks. Euron reeled. Charred fingers clawed for the horn, but it cracked from within, a fissure blooming along Valyrian bronze. A sound like weeping steel poured out, then silence. A silence so thick sailors pressed hands to ears as though to stop a bleeding. Drogon's wings unfurled, vast as cathedral vaults. He reared, neck muscles rippling, gaze fixed on Daenerys alone. She leapt, fearless, clutch catching dorsal spikes, and swung astride his shoulders as she had done in Meereen. The chain, still dangling, fluttered like a broken pennon. Euron scrambled, eyes wide, a dagger flashing. But Drogon's tail whipped him across the forecastle. With splintered, Kraken's crowned helm spun into the sea. Blood spattered deck rails. Silence lurched. Flame erupted, pure and cleansing. Rigging ignited, sails curled to cinders. Daenerys steered Drogon skyward, each wing beat scattering sparks that fell upon the Iron Fleet like meteors. Hulls cracked, tar-patched seams bursting into roaring infernos fed by stolen wildfire casks. Through smoke and screams she rose, tears cutting clean tracks through soot upon her cheeks. Not for the men below, but for the wound in Drogon's soul. She pressed forehead to scaled nape, murmuring Valyrian lullabies once sung in the red wastes. The great dragon shuddered, heart finding rhythm with hers. Below, Euron crawled amid flames, horn shards searing his palms. He screamed her name, a curse, a prayer, but the sea swallowed his voice, and somewhere beneath black waves, drowned gods laughed or wept. None could tell. By dawn, charred masts jutted from the narrow sea like grave posts. Survivor ships drifted, sails torn, while others burned to waterline. Feathered Serpent hovered at distance, Captain Xanda nodding in grim salute as Drogon circled once, casting a vast shadow over tangled wreckage. Barristan stood upon her deck, hand to heart, pride and relief softening battle-worn lines. Daenerys guided Drogon toward the rising sun. Black scales glistened anew, free of links, though burned scars remained where collar had bitten. As light poured over them, she breathed deep, felt the world settle. A fugitive no longer, but a queen without a kingdom, armed with fire uncompromised. Yet somewhere on the edge of thought lingered Euron's last howl, a prophecy unwritten. The Kraken was not yet drowned, and his hunger was a wound that would not close. War, she knew, was only beginning, but for this heartbeat between night and day, rider and dragon soared unshackled, and the world beneath held its breath, uncertain whether to fear or to hope. The candle's flame trembled upon the feathered serpent's captain's table, casting warped shadows across a sea-stained map of the stepstones. Daenerys watched the flame dance as if it were her own heart, quickened and restless. Beneath her fingertips the parchment felt brittle, threads of salt crusting its frayed edges. She traced the inked outline of Massey's hook where silence had burned. Already the narrow sea's tides would be sweeping wreckage toward distant shores, charred ribs of hulls, shards of Dragonbinder's bronze, limbs of Kraken raiders locked forever in blackened mail. But Euron's body had not been found. In her bones she felt the knowledge of his survival, a faint vibration like distant drums beating through the hull whenever she allowed herself to be still. Vengeance without a corpse always left a thread untied, and threads untied were the beginnings of snares. Rain drummed softly upon the stern windows as a gust rattled shutters loose. Xanda Quo padded across the cramped cabin, securing them with quick knots of cord. The captain's silk sleeves were damp, clinging to wiry arms tattooed in Carthene glyphs. Her eyes, black as obsidian marbles, studied the queen with a sailor's frank detachment. "Storm's tale," she murmured, "will chase us another day, maybe two. Not a beast to fear, but it will slow your dragon flights." Daenerys nodded, grateful for the mundane distraction of weather. "I sense Drogon enjoys racing storms," she said, "but I'd not have him flown to exhaustion." She glanced toward the deck above, where Drogon's dark mass lulled upon the forecastle, wings folded tight against squalls. He had devoured half a whale presented by Xanda's crew in tribute, then curled about the mainmast and slept, breath steaming in gentle plumes that warmed damp sailors. The collar scorch still ringed his neck like a bruise of shame, yet when Daenerys stroked the ridges beneath it, he nuzzled her with the careful tenderness of a warhorse remembering gentle paddocks. Kinvara entered without announcement, red robes whispering across planks. Her ruby choker guttered with its own inner glow, as though lit by blood fire. "The night sings of old debts," she said, voice hushed. "Each wave whispers his name."
Eurones, Daenerys ansvered, unsurpriset.
Wherever he crawled ashore, his hunger crawled with him. She lifted the vial from Kinvara's last ritual, its residue thick as congealed wine at the bottom of smoked glass. Will the horn truly remain shattered? Valyrian glyphs are cages for wild songs, the priestess replied. Break the cage and the song escapes, yet fragments linger in wind and water. A cunning hand might gather them, mend them with blood and soul. Her gaze bored into the queen's. Better you melt what remains in Dragonfire when next it is found. I shall, Daenerys promised, though in truth she feared Euron would find shards first. Men so devoured by appetite often sniffed power the way hounds sniff slain stags. Barristan Selmy rapped at the jam and ducked inside, silver hair slicked against his brow. He bowed, though space barely allowed full courtesy. Your Grace, he said. Scouts returned. A Myrish galley outbound from Tyrosh picked up ironborn survivors near the gullet. They paid well for fresh sailcloth and stronger liquor. Captain swore, a wounded captain with one I was among them. Yora, who had lingered silent near the door, stiffened. Rainwater dripped from his beard. Euron heads south then. Old Town? Or the Arbor to raid wine? Either gives him harbors to hide. Daenerys brushed parchment aside, fingers curling. Not south, she said slowly. He's tasted Dragonfire. He will want more, a weapon equal or greater. Where is such a weapon forged? Karth is boastful, Volantis jealous, but neither hold true fire. The Citadel hides lore, yet Ironborn scorn scholars. Where would a Kraken swim? Home to Pike, to call banners, to dredge gods' curses from their drowned archives. Pike sits beneath winter storms, Barristan cautioned. Reaching it risks autumn gales, and your allies in Meereen still bleed. Allies? She almost laughed. Meereen was never mine. I freed chains, but hearts were fettered by older masters. Fear, gold, old grudges. Let Meereen choose its fate. Her voice softened, weary. My children, my dragons, are my crown. If Euron binds one again, all I have suffered becomes ash on a wind I cannot ride. Kinvara placed 2 fingers to her temple as though listening to some distant choir. The Lord of Light shows me a bridge of storms, fury spanning salt and stone. Euron seeks a second horn, a pale one, carved of ice and bone. Hardhome's relic, Yora murmured. Fishermen speak of a horn exhumed from glacier coffins, a thing that calls dead whales to shore. Daenerys met Barristan's steady eyes. Then we sail for the north. We offer Dragonfire to the houses that once swore to Starks, to Baratheons, to no one but the old gods. We cross before Euron does. The knight inhaled, the weight of strategy settling like a fresh blade upon his shoulders. Dragonstone would shelter us, your grace, if Stannis' remnants still hold it. Let them hold or yield, she answered. Dragonstone's walls will hear a queen's step once more. A rolling boom shook the cabin, the sound of Drogon rousing above. Muffled cheers answered from deck as sailors glimpsed his silhouette unfurl against dawn's false light. Daenerys rose. Tell the men we change course northwest, she ordered. We skirt the Rainwood, then thread the Straits of Tarth. Feathered Serpent is swift enough to outrun most squalls. With Drogon aloft, we'll have eyes ahead. Xanda bowed with theatrical flourish, silver teeth glinting. As my queen commands, but pray to whatever flame you worship that currents favor us. Even a serpent may drown if storm's end hurls its spears of wind. Daenerys stepped onto the deck minutes later, hood thrown back into salted wind. Rain had eased to mist, the sky banded pearl and violet. Drogon crouched atop the mainmast's crossbeam, enormous wings tight, tail draped like a smoking pennant. He lowed in greeting, jaws parting to reveal emberglow across tongues of smoke. She climbed the rope ladder, sailors scattering like startled crabs. When she reached the spar, his massive head nudged her hip, careful as a courtier kissing a maiden's glove. She rubbed the scales around his eyes where tears had once etched trails of molten sorrow. His pupils, wide and soft, reflected first dawn. We hunt, she whispered, settling onto the ridge between shoulders. But not for blood alone. We hunt for songs, Drogon, for the music that keeps us free. With a thunderbeat of wings he leapt. The feathered serpent fell away, crew whooping as wind jarred rigging. Cloud tatters shredded against his sweep. Daenerys clung, hair streamed behind like a comet's tail. Below, the ship's brass figurehead, half wyvern, half woman, shrunk to a gilt toy on foaming slate. She tasted storm salt and freedom's ache, and for a moment distance eroded fear until only purpose remained. By nightfall 4 days later, they sighted the faint loom of Tartha's jade peaks. Lightning spidered far west, silent. The ship rode a knifing current, sails taut with borrowed fury. On the 5th dawn, they rounded Shipbreaker Bay, where distant white towers of Storm's End pierced rainy haze. Smoke curled from breached battlements. Old wounds from war Stannis had waged against his own brother's ghosts. Kinvara claimed red priests there kindled small fires to lure wayward souls. Daenerys cared little for ghosts of the past when one-eyed krakens stalked the now. Drogon scouted ahead each evening, returning with gristle of seagulls caught mid-air, or with flecks of iron flakes clinging to talons, trophies of wrecked longships rolling in lonely coves. Euron's passage left tide marks of violence. The Iron Fleet had split after its mauling. Survivors raided remote fisher villages along Crackclaw Point, snatching timber and livestock, though few dared linger. Yet no captain sighted Euron himself. His shadow faded like smoke, present only as fear whispered by tavern tapsters or traced in blood on cabin doors. At anchor off Driftmark, Daenerys convened council in a sand-scoured lighthouse whose beacon stones had fallen dark decades before. The air reeked of gull droppings and rusted chains, but its crumbling parapet offered a view clear to Dragonstone's obsidian crown shimmering across the strait. Fires flickered along its heights, signal beacons from garrisoned men. Dragonstone's gates closed, Barristan reported, scanning through a spyglass. Banner unknown, black above red. Not Baratheon, not Stag on Heart. He passed the lens to Daenerys, who glimpsed a sigil half-concealed by gusts. A trident-shaped claw ringed in flames. Blackwater Cell Sails. You're a guest. Company of the Lords of the Waters. I fought them during Balon's rebellion. They thrived on salvage, no loyalty save coin. Coin Euron may have promised, Daenerys mused. He lacks a fleet now. Dragonstone's harbor would serve as forge for new hulls, its mines for iron. She lowered the lens. We take the castle before his arrival. Kinvara's ruby pulsed crimson. Salt and smoke birthed dragons once. Seize the fortress of fire and you seize prophecy's root. Plans formed on salt-etched lantern maps. The Lords of the Waters boasted perhaps 400 men. Galleys light enough for quick flight but meager against Drogon's wrath. Yet Daenerys had no wish to scorch her ancestral seat. She required its docks intact, its storerooms and smithies, and whatever dragon lore remained unread within the painted table chamber. She would need cunning. That night, beneath a moon half obscured by ragged cloud, Daenerys donned soot-black leathers newly sewn by Xanda's quartermaster. Barristan and Grey Worm, still hobbling but resolute, led 24 unsullied across shoals at low tide, spears tipped with dull cloth to muffle clank. Drogon glided low, his great shadow melding into cliffs until he perched silent upon a sea stack, amber eyes watching. Daenerys waded knee-deep through surf chilled to bone, heart hammering with memories of Cartha's betrayal, of Meereen's false peace. If she failed here, Euron would sweep north unopposed, perhaps claiming Winterfell's ancient horn or some relic from dead Valyria's smoking bones. She could not allow either path. Freedom for Drogon meant freedom for all dragons yet unborn beneath distant sands or slumbering eggs in Shadowland's crypts. She would not see them bound again. A narrow goat trail wound from foaming reef to a postern gate blocked by an oaken door banded in rusting steel. On the cliff above, 2 cells words stamped and cursed at cold, their torches painting the air orange. Grey Worm scaled the rocks like a lizard, dagger between teeth. One torch sputtered. A wheeze, a soft gurgle, then torch and man toppled silently. The other turned, too late. Barristan's mailed hand clamped his mouth, blade slipping between ribs. The body slumped against battlements, Its blood steamed on stone, then pooled dark. The postern yielded after 3 silent hinges snapped under a prybar. Unsullied speared the courtyard guard before boots scraped flagstones once trod by Targaryen kings. Daenerys crossed the threshold last, Drogon's low rumble rolling across outer wall like thunder. Cell sails within feasted on stolen lamprey pies, oblivious to their doom. One stumbled into the yard to piss and found a spear point beneath his chin. Barristan's low command spared him if he led them to the armory door latch. Keys clinked. Latch turned. Unsullied spilled like a silver tide. Flame erupted only once. Drogon's breath roared through a bachelor's tower where crossbowmen had holed. Stone blistered, windows blew molten glass. But the rest surrendered quickly, mercy purchased by obedience. By dawn, black banners were hauled down, replaced by a makeshift standard, Daenerys' own, painted by a sailor on spare canvas. A 3-headed dragon black on red, but with Drogon's silhouette larger, wings extending beyond the usual lines, as if heralds already sensed his ascendancy beyond any spawn of Balerion. She walked the halls where Aegon once plotted conquest, fingers grazing ash-dark stone. The painted table still dominated the war room, a massive black-green map of Westeros carved in shape of the realm. Dust cloaked its ridges, but even in dim light the carved rivers and mountains glimmered like onyx veins. Daenerys traced a fingertip over the Torrentine, across the reach to Pike, a jagged claw jutting from western seas. From Pike she traveled north with her touch to the wall of ice. Kinvara observed, silent, as if reading omen in each motion. 2 horns, Daenerys murmured. One shattered, one still silent. If Euron gains the second, could he bind Drogon anew? The horn of ice was wrought in dead tongue, Kinvara replied. Its song is cold. It commands death, not flame. But should he wield it, the breach between flame and ice may tear the world's skin. She laid her hand upon the table where the wall loomed painted. Old powers stir there. Your coming may awaken more than dragons. Yora entered bearing scrolls found in a locked cabinet. Treatises on Valyrian glass candles. Manuscripts from Septon Barth about dragon bonds. He set them gently. Some speak of a resonance between dragon mind and rider's blood, he said, but also of ancient dampening crystals. Maesters once sought to mute the madness of dragons. Citadel sealed such lore. Daenerys unrolled a brittle parchment. Glyphs of High Valyrian glistened blue in candlelight, diagrams of lenses and curved mirrors carved from dragonglass. It suggests a focusing matrix, she whispered, that strengthens shared consciousness. If we could replicate such, Drogon and I might resist any new horn's call. Barristan frowned. You mean to forge sorcery of your own? To forge harmony, she corrected softly. A bond beyond force, beyond blood alone. Grey Worm limped to her side, saluting. Unsullied have secured docks and granaries.
No casualties.
Prisoners await judgment. Feed them, she ordered. Offer choice. Swear service or sail away on a single ship stripped of arms. Barristan arched an eyebrow. Your grace risks rebellion. Not rebellion, respect. They were cell-sails, not sworn knights. Let them choose. Word of her mercy spread by evening, and nearly 200 men bent knee. Among them, a Tyroshi ballista engineer named Varisno Vailian boasted knowledge of welded Valyrian steel. He claimed to have once harnessed hearthforge heat with obsidian shards to craft blades that never dull. Daenerys summoned him. If she was to build crystals of bonding, she would need such skill. Euron Greyjoy awoke upon a bed of eelgrass in a sea cave beneath the cliffs of the Shield Isles. Waves sloshed salt against his boots. Foam hissed around jagged stones like serpents nursing venom. His head throbbed where horn shards had gashed scalp. A woman with hair the color of rust knelt beside him, applying a poultice that reeked of rotted kelp. Her cloak bore the emblem of a hanged king, all sign and port that she belonged to the priests of the Forsaken, a cult older than the drowned god who preached ecstasy in oblivion. Easy, Lord Captain, she crooned. The sea spat you forth for reason. All waters converge to your will. He shoved her away, staggering upright. Memories came as shattered oaths. Drogon's tale, the deck exploding in firestorm, the plunge into brine. Weight of the horns halves dragging him down until some instinct cut leather thong. He had surfaced clinging to flotsam, lungs searing with salted flame. Sharks circled, but none dared bite. A kraken's stink repels lesser predators. Now he stood, gaze hard, one eye blazing cobalt, the other bleeding where cinder had fused eyelid. He found the horns broken half lying on a rock, glyphs still faintly glowing. He cradled it to chest. "Tekra," he growled, addressing the priestess. "You serve the deep. Could the deep fuse fire and ice?" "The waters swallow both," she said, eyes glazed with reverence. "In their depths, drowned sorcerers dream horns older than sky." "You will dive then," he commanded. "Bring relics of the abyss." He stepped toward the cave mouth, watching pale morning wash the horizon. Ships dotted sea lanes, merchant carracks, red winecogs, a war galley flying golden rows of high garden. Pray all. But first he would need a ship. A ragged handful of survivors emerged, haunted faces he knew. Christopher Botley missing an ear, Schemer's lioness with her javelin still strapped. They bowed low. Euron's grin bared broken teeth, but still possessed its necrotic charm. "I promised you kingdoms," he told them, "and I shall deliver. All the better if I pluck them first from the corpse of a dragon queen." He turned inland where spires of Starfall's highlands faded in mist. "To the Red Mountains," he said. "Rumors speak of a white horn kept by Danes, an heirloom carved from a fallen star." He stroked the shard. "Fire shattered. Let ice mend. Blood will pay." At dusk they waylaid a trading cog near Torsh. Euron climbed its ratlins with savage grace, bare-chested, wounds seeping. When he gained deck, he slaughtered 2 guards, tied captain to the mast, and forced crew to kneel. He offered choice: serve a god of storm and shadow or feed crabs. None chose crabs. With sails reversed, they set course for the Torrentine, where acquired spies claimed the relic slept within the castle named High Hermitage, guarded by a lone, melancholic knight. Euron's laughter drifted across waves, as jagged as gull calls. In his hand, horn shards pulsed, echoing faintly a screaming note only he could hear. He pressed them to ear, and in the wine he swore he caught the flutter of distant wings. Dragonstone's forged chimneys exhaled black plumes by the time Daenerys assumed residence in Maegor's tower. She took no throne. Instead, she sat each dawn beside Drogon on the rocky beach, sharing salted carrion gulls he caught, speaking to him in soft Valyrian, so words twined with mind touch. Their bond deepened like roots seeking water. Sometimes she closed her eyes and felt heat ripple along membranes of wings as he stretched. She tasted faint metallic tang when he sniffed slag heaps, heard sonar pings of dolphin pods a league offshore, saw sparks shower in forges through his peripheral gaze. Each night she wrote sensations into parchment so maesters might one day study, but she sealed records with wax marked "for my blood only." Within the ancient smithies, Varisno Vailian and Xanda supervised the shaping of obsidian lenses. The process devoured coal stores. Kinvara chanted prayers over crucibles, flames turning violet. Glass flowed like midnight across ivory molds, cooling into curved shards the size of buckler shields. They set them within bronze rings etched by unsullied hands. When 6 were complete, they were mounted in a circle upon a basalt dais carved from the isle's volcanic core. On a windless night, Daenerys led Drogon into the old dragon pit, now roofless but walls intact. The sky overhead revered with stars. Kinvara positioned each lens upon iron struts, aligning them so starlight refracted into a single pool. The air hummed, scent of ozone. Drogon snorted, uneasy. Daenerys placed her palm upon the central pool of light. Its warmth sank through skin to bone. She beckoned Drogon to lower his head. When his snout touched the light, his pupils flared silver. A chord thrummed between them, an unheard anthem. She felt his memories, hatching amid pyre heat. First flight above Dothraki Sea, agony of Horn's chain, flow through her like molten silver, searing yet sublime. She offered in return her own. Tears upon Khal Drogo's pillow, the taste of horse-heart blood, the scent of Meereen's jasmine nights, loneliness of command. Light brightened, lenses vibrating. In that moment, Daenerys knew the bond had reached a depth no horn could sever. Even should axe cleave her skull, Drogon would know the path to her spirit's echo. Kinvara's voice broke the trance. It is done. Fire has drunk of flesh, flesh of fire. So long as these lenses remain unshattered, your link stands unshaken. Then we guard them, Daenerys said. She ordered unsullied posted. Varisno built steel vault doors. But some part of her recognized that the true lens lay within their souls, beyond reach of steel. 2 nights later, ravens arrived from White Harbor and Bear Island. They carried warnings. Ironborn longships prowled the Sunset Sea again, flying banners of Black Kraken split by Red Flame, Euron's new mark. Houses Dustin and Umber reported fires along lonely coasts. At the same time, word came that a war party of Dothraki had ridden from Volantis upon captured Lyseni galleys, seeking their Khaleesi. Daenerys dispatched fast cogs to guide them to Blackwater Bay's hidden coves. Allies gathered as storm clouds, yet on each fresh scroll her eyes searched for any sighting of Euron himself. None came. He had vanished deeper into river valleys of Dorne, as if swallowed by reddish sands. High Hermitage slumbered under a harvest moon, its tall white tower stark against purple slopes. Euron's hired arbalesters crept along goat paths, crossbows wrapped in oilcloth. Pekra prowled with them, rattling bone charms. The castle's garrison numbered under 50. A hush of grief had hung since the young Lord Edric Dane's death at Storm's End. Only his cousin, Ser Jaehaerys, once a squire to Beric Dondarrion, kept his oath to guard the family relics while the senior Danes warred far from home. Euron scaled the wall with practiced ease, hook blades finding mortar cracks. Within the armory, he brushed cobwebbed helms aside until he found a stand draped in dusty violet silk. Beneath lay a horn white as moon-bleached coral, spiraling with veins of lapis. Ice crystals glimmered where inner helix met mouthpiece, though no cold wind blew. Runes unknown to maesters shimmered like frostfire. He lifted it, feeling a sting as temperature dropped around his hand. A crackle of brittle air skated across torches. Outside, a wolf howled.
Euron grinned, pupils dilating torstai pinpoints.
Mine, he breathed. Ser Jaehaerys burst into the hall, blade drawn. His shock at seeing marauders quickly hardened to duty. He charged, parrying 2 crossbow bolts, cutting one raider's throat. Euron let the knight reach him. At the last second, he raised the white horn like a shield. Steel kissed ivory and shattered, shards of both peppering the floor. Frost bloomed along Jaehaerys' arm, skin paling to snow marble. He stared, confused, then collapsed as rigid as winter statue. Euron looked down, fascinated. "Your death is beautiful," he murmured. He motioned to Pekra. "Bind his heart for offering." They fled before alarm fully roused, scaling cliffs to where the cog waited cloaked in tarred sails. Dawn found them far offshore. Euron stood at prow clutching both horn halves, one of fire, one of ice. In his mind he heard a chord of opposites, discordant yet pregnant with monstrous promise. Somewhere north, a wall of ice groaned. Somewhere east, volcanoes fumed. He tasted the world's fault line on his tongue like copper. He instructed Pekra to melt the iron nails of the ship, to temper them with serpent's blood and forge a clasp that would fuse the horns at broken throat. She labored amid coals, chanting. When dusk fell, the horns were one, pale ivory twisting into black bronze, runes wrenching themselves new shapes. The seam pulsed faintly, as if heartbeat. "Now we need breath," Euron said, stroking the rim. "Not mine. Mine is spent." He gazed at Pekra, at Botley, at Lyness, each recoiled, sensing fate. His smile was a wound. A king's horn must be fed a king's soul. He looked south toward Old Town's high tower spire, distant as a splinter of the moon. "We sail for Old Town. There sleeps a highborn man who styles himself High Septon. His screams will be prayer enough." Autumn's first snow dusted roofs of Winterfell by the time ravens carried news of Dragonstone's capture. Lady Asha Greyjoy paced ramparts, expression a knot of fury. Theon, shrunken but healing, watched from a bench, clutching a fur he had not earned. "My uncle hunts dragons," Asha spat. "But he abandoned his men. Typical Crow-Eye. He will wreck our people on his obsessions." Sansa Stark, tall in gray wool, answered calmly. "Then help us wreck him first. My father once said Ironborn follow only strength. Show them your strength, Lady Asha. Bring your fleet to our side. Dragons fight for Winterfell now. Fight with them." Theon lowered his gaze, remembering a charred direwolf sigil Drogon had scorched into Iron Fleet decks. It glowed in his nightmares still. "Some Ironborn still value honor," he whispered. "We could send longships to Pike with that message." Asha sighed. "I pray you're right, little brother." Her voice carried doubt. Letters were drafted, sealed in direwolf wax. Sansa penned them herself. "Pledge oaths to Queen Daenerys, else share Euron's doom beneath dragonfire. Ravens beat southward. Whether Ironborn heeded or harried would shape northern fates soon enough." Daenerys read Winterfell's reply in the great hall of Dragonstone while eastwind gales rattled leaded panes. She felt cold settle in marrow at each mention of Euron's raids. His new horn, rumors that he meant to breach the wall. She gathered counselors. "We cannot wait," she declared. "I will ride Drogon north along coastal airs. Feathered Serpent will follow with supplies unsullied, and the Dothraki when they arrive. We link with Winterfell, protect small folk, and smash any Ironborn foothold." Barristan frowned. "If you leave, who guards Lenses? Grey Worm and half the Unsullied remain. Xanda stays, Varisno stays. Kinvara will oversee flame warding." She placed a hand on the knight's shoulder. "Barristan, you ride with me. 500 leagues under wing, no slower than gull flight, will reach White Harbor in days." Kinvara stepped forward, ruby glowing. A shadow stirs beyond the wall. A horn of ice could wake sleepers older than men. Flames alone may not prevail. Steel hearts must stand with fire. Yora's knuckles whitened on sword hilt. "Then I will go north by land with 200 spears. If Euron breaches coast, we'll hold him until Drogon returns." Plans laid, they prepared. Daenerys visited the vault where lenses glowed faint under lanterns. She pressed her palm to central crystal, feeling bond resonate. Drogon's answering rumble echoed across courtyard, though he perched half a mile away on a cliff spire catching last warmth of dying sun. She smiled, an intimacy deeper than any lover's whisper. Then she looked past bond to the coil of fate beyond horizon. In its faint music she heard clash of storms and felt time narrowing. At dawn sky bled gold. She mounted Drogon. Barristan rode behind her in a high saddle rigged by Varisno, a contraption of braided leather and iron loops. The old knight hid discomfort with stoic pride, though each wing beat jarred his spine. They soared northwest, spray flecking scales, seafowl scattering in panic. Behind them Feathered Serpent loosed rigging and jibed onto a strong nor'wester, her sails bellied like thunderclouds. Hours passed in roaring wind. Islands slipped beneath. Gulltown's white towers, Flint's finger bleak and sharp, the fingers where fishermen waved oars at the dragon's passage. At dusk they alighted upon a stony ridge above Seal Bay. Wildlings in ragged furs fled at sight, leaving smoky fires untended. Daenerys warmed hands over embers while Drogon hunted narwhals offshore. Barristan's joints cracked as he dismounted, but his smile was a boy's. "I never dreamt to ride a dragon," he said softly. "Even at King Aerys' tourneys I only glimpsed the bones of Balerion once. Thank you, your grace." She touched his mailed arm. "You followed me through deserts and cities that hated us. The skies repay." Stars glittered cold. Somewhere beyond northern Aurora, Euron plodded. She felt it as a pressure behind temples. Sleep came fitful. Old Town's copper domes gleamed under pale sun as Euron's captured cogs slid into whispering sound disguised as a Tyroshi spice trader. He stepped onto high-tower docks robed in saffron silks, eye patch replaced by polished jade disc. Pekra slinked behind in acolyte garb, her rust hair braided with kelp gems. Dock guards barely glanced. Pilgrims arrived daily. They drifted into labyrinth alleys where incense choked air and gull wings flashed silver overhead. That afternoon, the High Septon processed through starry September accompanied by warrior sons. Euron watched from a shadowed arch, measuring distances. The man was plump, cheeks rouged to hide broken veins, voice crooning pious benedictions. As he passed the shrine of the seven-pointed star, Euron stepped forth. A flick of wrist, thin blade-parted chain of holy censer. Smoke spilled into the air heavy with soporific herbs Pekra had mixed. Septon's eyes widened then glazed. Guards coughed, knees buckling. Euron seized the holy man by throat, pressing him against marble font. "Confess," he purred. "Sing me your sins in high voice." The High Septon sputtered. Euron carved a shallow slit along his cheek, letting blood drip into the font's holy water. It hissed, turning crimson. Pekra chanted. The cleric screamed once before Euron plunged dagger beneath sternum. The note echoed like a bell. Blood sheeted red, spattering the merged horn clutched in Euron's other hand. Runes flared. Alarm rose, bells, shouts. Euron dragged the dying man into archway as Pekra appended a jar of oil, flames licking carved pews. Chaos blossomed. They fled through scriptorium passages into catacombs where ancient glass candles and black stone devils littered shelves. There he held horn above corpse. As life ebbed, horn drank it greedily. The seam fused, molten sound vibrating. When last tremor ceased, a single tone issued, almost inaudible. A sigh like ice skimming across still lake. Euron exhaled wonder. "One breath," he whispered. "One breath to rule us all." Outside, half the starry September burned. They escaped by skiff into fog. The Tyroshi cog sailed before any warship stirred. South again they fled, but not to Pike. Euron now craved more than crowns of men. He charted course for Skagos, where legends spoke of stone dragons sleeping beneath frozen cliffs. Dragons of granite haunted by restless hearts of fire and ice. If he could wake even one and bind it, Drogon's equal would rise. Word of Old Town's desecration reached Dragonstone on Raven's horse wings. Grey Worm read the cipher scroll, grim. Kinvara's reply burned quick. The many-faced god's temple torched. A horn of abomination now drinks king's blood. He heads north on tide of ash. When Feathered Serpent docked at White Harbor's wharves, Daenerys had already reached Winterfell on Drogon's back. Snow whirled around broken towers, but dragons melt snow. Children pressed faces to battlements, wonder lighting eyes. Sansa greeted her beneath weirwood leaves that fluttered crimson.
Nortman bent knee.
That night, a feast of venison stew warmed the hall, flickering with dragon shadow. Daenerys sat beside Sansa, feeling kinship born of shared ordeals. Barristan spoke quietly with Lady Asha, who had arrived aboard stout war-longship Black Manta. Ironborn captains pledged reef silver to fight Crow's Eye. Plans emerged. Asha's ships patrol coast. Northmen raise watchfires. Drogon scour seaways. Dothraki outriders snowbreak plains, scouting raider camps. Jon Snow, king in name once, now simply Lord Commander of Winterfell's host after abdication, offered the Night's Watch's remaining rangers to man White Knife Estuary. Winds howled outside, shaking shutters. Inside, alliances sealed over cups of hot spiced ale. Daenerys slipped away before dawn to the Godswood. Snow sighed beneath boots. She knelt before Heart Tree, its carved face weeping sap like blood. She whispered, "I have no gods but those of fire and storm, yet I ask blessing. Let my dragon burn path only for justice." Wind answered with low moan. Behind her, footsteps crunching signaled Sansa. The red-haired lady stood quietly. After a time she said, "My father once prayed here that winter would be kind. It wasn't, but hope remains stubborn." Daenerys rose, brushing snow from gloves. "Winter comes fierce," she acknowledged. "Yet we must be fiercer." They turned together, sisters of circumstance, their breaths misting. Euron's cog plowed gray waters off Skagos, prow flecked with rime. Jagged cliffs rose like broken dragon teeth crowned in pine. Legend held that cannibals dwelled among icy crags, worshipping goat-headed gods. Euron found this alluring. He anchored in a cove where beached whale bones formed arches over tide pools. Pekra kindled black candles of human tallow. Their smoke coiled, seeking cracks in reality. The horn lay upon fur-covered altar of seal hide, shards of sapphire encircling it. Euron donned robes cut from the late High Septon's vestments, stained scarlet. He began to blow. The first note crawled across sea like a monstrous whale song, low and mournful, vibrating permafrost. Icicles shattered from cave mouths. The second note climbed, pitch of keening wind across glass. Snow devils whirled. The third note emerged incomplete, Euron's lungs failing as Horn's hunger gnawed. He coughed blood, but sound lingered, weaving fire and ice. Deep beneath cliffs, something shifted, ancient stone grinding. Pekra screamed in ecstasy as cliff face cracked, disgorging a bloom of blue flame. Shapes stirred within. A silhouette of wings fused to stone, eyes glimmering icy cerulean. A roar deeper than Earth's mantle cried out, half living, half echo. The cave mouth widened, disgorging shards of basalt. Euron laughed though blood-sheeted lips. His horn called, and the mountain answered. From Winterfell's ramparts Daenerys felt the tremor, faint but unmistakable in bond resonance. Drogon, perched above broken gatehouse, raised head, wings rustling. A second tremor rippled, cold, alien, like ice sliding along spine. She looked north beyond Last Hearth. Horizon shimmered with aurora flickers, though night not yet full. Kinvara, arrived via snow-drenched rider, approached breathless. He blows horn again, she warned. A half-song but enough. Something stirs beyond Skagos. Daenerys mounted Drogon instantly. Northmen lined yard, axes raised in silent salute. She promised Sansa swift return. Barristan insisted to ride again though joints ached. She permitted. They launched into leaden skies, snow devolving into knives upon wind. Cold bit cheeks, but dragonfire warmed. Hours later they hovered above Skagos cliffs. Nightfall cloaked ice in navy gloom, but Drogon's eyes cut darkness. He roared, flame belching, illuminating shattered cavern where Euron alone knelt, horn cast aside cracking with frost. Before him the stone dragon stirred, wings of granite detaching from cliff with groans like calving glaciers. It was colossal, long as Drogon yet thrice thicker, scales between stone and ice. Runnels of blue fire coursed veins. Eyes shone moon-white. With each heave dust billowed, stone shedding like dead skin to reveal obsidian ridges beneath. Euron raised arms in triumph, as if conductor greeting orchestra. Daenerys circled, heart hammering. This was no living beast, yet no mere statue. Some necromancy bound ice flame and rock. Drogon growled, uneasy. Barristan shouted over wind, "We strike now! Shatter horn!" They dove. Euron saw them and laughed, retrieving horn, raising to cracked lips. Sound split air, jagged but weaker, his body failing to feed full breath. Still the stone dragon twitched, wings flexing, unnatural cracks leaking blue flame snowflakes. Drogon's fire raked cliff. Blue flame met orange, hissing. The stone beast roared silence. Shockwave tossed Drogon sideways. Daenerys clung. She sensed bond straining, not by Horn's compulsion but by antithesis. Flame repelled by frozen ire. She steered Drogon into tight spiral, dodging shards of ice rock falling. Barristan drew sword though useless against giant. Daenerys scanned for Horn. Drogon's tail sideswiped Euron, sending him sprawling across ice shelf. Horn skittered near cliff edge. Pekra lunged to retrieve, but Drogon landed between, claws cleaving altar like reed. He snapped Pekra in jaws, tossing her limp body upon crashing surf. Euron rose, face half frozen from Horn's feedback. "Dragon whore," he croaked. "Bow before the new god." Daenerys dismounted, feet crunching frost, blade drawn. "Gods answer for their crimes," she said. "Kneel and die quickly." He spat blood. Stone dragon behind him loomed, wings unfurling fully now. Within its chest glowed skull-like cavity of blue fire. Euron staggered toward it, seeking safety. but horn lay mere feet from Daenerys. She dashed, seized it. Frost burned palms, yet she held. The horn vibrated foully, screaming inside bone. She called to Drogon. Flame roared, heating horn until cracks spidered anew. Ice melted, bronze blistered. She slammed horn against boulder. Fracture deepened. Second slam, metal shrieked. Third, Drogon's fire enveloped. Horn exploded with high-pitched howl. Steam obscured world. Shards blew searing gales. Stone dragon froze mid-movement, blue light guttering. Cracks blackened. Within cavity, fire snuffed. A thunderous groan shook cliff. Monster slumped, returning to inert rock, shattered.
Euron screamed, stumbling.
Without horn, his will bled away. Daenerys advanced, but Barristan blocked. "My queen," he said softly. "Dragons do not soil talons with carrion." He approached Euron, who wielded hooked dagger with trembling hand. 2 strokes of old knight's sword ended it. First severing blade, second slicing beneath collar. Euron fell, blood dark on snow, final curse lost in spume. Barristan wiped steel on cloak. Snowflakes hissed upon blade. Let sea claim what sea wrought. Daenerys stood over shards of horn melting in heated stone. She felt relief flood tempered by grief for lives lost, for horns once hung by Valyrians to enslave wonders. She looked to Drogon. He bent neck, nudged her gently. Bond hummed bright. The cliff began to crumble. Stone dragons' mass undermined foundations. They mounted quickly. As they lifted, the whole shelf collapsed into roaring tide, dragging Euron's body and horn fragments into abyss. Steam coiled, obscuring final gaze. Above cloud layer they leveled flight, breathless. Dawn's first streaks painted horizon rose. Barristan's laugh, weary but joyous, carried across wind. "The Kraken drowned after all," he said. Yet Daenerys felt no triumph. She saw ahead tasks. Heal lands aflame, shape rule by justice, guard bond from those who would always covet dragon souls. She rested forehead upon Drogon's scales, whispering thanks. They banked south toward Winterfell where allies waited, and further south lay kingdoms broken by petty kings. Dragons had returned not to conquer but to change. Fire, to purge chains. Ice, to remind hearts of fragile warmth. And as sun rose behind his beating wings, Daenerys vowed the dawn would belong to no horn, no tyrant, but to the free flight of every soul that dared dream beyond stone. Snow sifted from a milk-gray sky, the flakes small and tight-packed as grains of salt. Descending so slowly they seemed not to fall at all but merely to appear, like memory settling upon the ramparts of Winterfell. In the courtyard below, blacksmiths hammered sparks from red-hot iron, their strokes ringing through the air as steady as a heartbeat. Unsullied and dark wool cloaks drilled beside Northmen in patched fur, spear hafts thudding the frozen ground in ragged unison, while a handful of curious children watched from the steps of the great hall, wide-eyed at the cadence of a foreign discipline beating inside ancestral walls older than their grandfathers' bones. Daenerys stood above them on the ledge beneath a shattered crenel, arms wrapped in a cloak the color of ash, her silver-gold braids pinned in a single knot. Frost gathered on the tips of her lashes, yet the chill barely touched her thoughts. Beyond the battlements she could see the faint glow of watchfires daisy-chained across the vast snowfield between Winterfell and the King's Road. Beacons raised 3 leagues apart by Lady Sansa's order, each manned by pairs of archers and a drum runner. A low mist clung to hollows, swirling like restless souls. Somewhere south of those embers, the first outriders of the Dothraki Khalasar were drawing closer, their arrival marked by small dust devils on the far horizon at dawn, by discarded horse bones discovered in the shallow ditches at dusk. Soon the plains around Winterfell would thunder beneath hooves again, and the wallowing hush that clutched the north would give way to war songs braided with bells. Beside the queen, Ser Barristan Selmy leaned upon the rim of a broken merlin, the wind lifting silver wisps of hair from the edges of his hood. His cheek was mottled yellow where a saddle girth had pitched him hard during the northward flight. Yet his eyes, ice-bright, tracked every movement in the yard with undimmed vigilance. "Steel and snow make uneasy brothers," he said quietly. Yet it warms the blood to see them drilling side by side. A fortnight ago, half those northerners carried pikes as though they were masts in a gale. "They have courage enough," Daenerys answered, gaze never leaving the courtyard. "Courage is a spear's true edge," my brother used to say. Viserys had meant it as mockery, the courage of the Dothraki, of Sellswords, of men who had what he lacked. She tasted no mockery now, only the bittersweet echo of a long-dead hearth she had never known. Barristan's gloved fingers tapped the hilt of his sword, a habit adopted since Skagos, as though reminding himself blade and body still answered call together. "Have you considered Lady Sansa's petition?" he asked, softer still. "I have." Daenerys drew breath, watched it plume white. "She would have me wed. A king or queen in Westeros is armorless without marriage treaties." He turned, searching her face. "House Stark's blood is old. To join dragons to direwolves would bind the North tighter than any oath of parchment. It would also bind me to a throne before the realm is ready, or before I know whether the realm is what I desire." She lifted a hand, palm open to catch a snowflake. It melted instantly, trapped heat of dragon bond shimmering in her veins. "I was born amid the salt and smoke of my brother's fury, Ser Barristan, not in these quiet snows. If I marry for peace, will peace hold when spring thaws the ice and men remember their grudges?" Barristan considered. "It is not marriage that keeps the peace, your grace, but the will to honor it. Still, banners gather round strength far faster than round solitude. Sansa Stark is shrewd. She knows her North cannot stand alone if Lannister gold, Tyrell grain, or Blackwood arrows turn against them once more. Nor can your own freedmen in Slaver's Bay hold Meereen should Yunkai or Volantis test that vacuum. A union might buy the harvest of patience." He paused, then added gently, "Stannis Baratheon learned too late that justice without friendship leaves a man colder than these stones." Daenerys closed her hand. The warmth lingered in the hollow of her palm. "Perhaps," she said, "but I will not barter away my coming dawn as though it were only another torque of silver for some lord's neck." She smiled faintly to soften the words. "Besides, Lady Sansa has offered no groom, only the concept. I wonder which wolf she would loose upon my dragon." Barristan's lips curved. "If rumor flies faster than ravens, some name Lord Jon among possibilities, though he has abjured titles since abdicating. Others whisper of Robert Glover's son, or a Karstark cousin raised in the Vale. Any would kneel gladly, though. Winterfell's hearth is tall, but dragons burn higher." "Jon," she echoed, tasting the name. She had glimpsed the man only briefly on her first night in Winterfell. Broad-shouldered, shadowed by weight of ghosts, gray eyes flickering each time Drogon's silhouette blanketed the yard. He had spoken little and bowed deep, then turned away with courtesy crisp as frost. Some part of her sensed scars behind his silence, a sorrow that might align with her own. Yet she had not come north to weave romance from smoke. She had come to snatch horns from krakens and shatter them before the world could bleed again. She exhaled, banishing the thought. "Let us master tomorrow's drill. Then we discuss marriages, if tomorrow still dawns bright." Barristan followed her gaze outward. A fresh gust rattled the flagpole where her hastily painted banner, three-headed dragon more somber than the Targaryen red, clapped against iron. Somewhere beyond the hills, the patched remains of Euron's fleets might yet be limping toward some hidden shore. Somewhere far south, the Lords of King's Landing played at small councils and whisper networks much as vipers played at courtship. The world's turning would not pause for a queen's hesitation. Down in the yard Arya Stark vaulted the saddle of a lithe chestnut, her slender shape clad in boiled leather sewn with pale direwolf sigils. She threaded the unsullied ranks, waving practice lance overhead, coaxing them into a wheeling maneuver that matched Dothraki light horse tactics Ser Jorah had described over spiced mulled wine 2 nights prior. Laughter rode on the cold air. For a moment the courtyard pulsed with something newly born, a rhythm half Northman drum, half Giscari march, half free woman's wild whoop. Daenerys let it wash through her. Alliances, indeed, often grew from places that parchments never reached. A horn sounded once, deep and brusque, from atop the East Gate Tower. Not the doom of Dragonbinder, no. This note rattled with iron and wind, Winterfell's call to council. Daenerys shifted, drawing her cloak about her shoulders. "Come," she said. "Lady Sansa gathers us again. Mayhap fresh ravens bring darker tidings." They descended stone steps 3 flights to the covered walk, passing torches that hissed with tallow-rich flame. Servants hurried in pairs, arms full of stacked plates or bundled sheepskins destined for the hall's long benches. The scent of stewed cabbage and honey-roasted hare drifted on eddies of warm air leaking from under heavy oak doors. Yet tension coiled beneath domestic bustle like a serpent beneath dry leaves. Inside, the great hall had shed none of its stark sobriety. Long trestles dark with age, rushes newly laid but already beaten flat by boots. A single chandelier whose iron ring still bore scorch marks from the day Ramsay Bolton's dogs had howled here. At the dais, Sansa sat flanked by Maester Wolkan and Asha Greyjoy. Jon Snow, hair damp from snow melt, leaned against a pillar near the edge of the high table, conversing with Davos Seaworth in hushed tones. Arya perched cross-legged on the end of the dais, polishing needle with a scrap of oiled cloth. The hall quieted as Daenerys entered, the rustle of cloaks replaced by the faint creak of settling timber. She did not stride to the dais. She had refused that seat each council, preferring the vantage of the map board near the hearth where carved direwolves stood sentinel over a scattering of river-worn stones marking outrider sightings. Barristan moved to his customary place at her right shoulder. Across the board stood Lady Sansa, tall, flame hair pinned with a weirwood bone clasp shaped like the Stark sigil. "We have eyes on the southern road," Sansa said without prelude, voice carrying. A raven reached before the horn. The Dothraki outriders passed Queenscrown 4 hours past. They should crest the last river by dawn. I have ordered field tents erected and hearths lit at the western paddocks. We can stable 200 horses under slate roofs, no more. The rest will need lean-tos or open corral. Yora, who had entered silent as smoke, nodded. "They are accustomed to the open sky, my lady. So long as we provide feed and a bonfire, they'll rest easily." Davos stroked his salt-kissed beard. "And their commander, what was his name?" "Jogo," Daenerys supplied. "Blood of my blood. He will speak for the Khalasar until we determine our next march." Jon straightened from the pillar. "We'll greet him beneath the broken tower gatehouse," he said. "Asha's shield-bearers will show iron-born flags of truce. The last thing we need is horse archers loosing into our wall garrison." Asha snorted. "Show them our Kraken banners stripped of Euron's red flame, aye. Let the Dothraki see Iron Men can kneel to something other than drowned gods." Sansa's gaze flicked from Jon to Daenerys. "Our second matter is more grave." She gestured to Wolkan, who produced a rolled hide cylinder and unstoppered it. A raven flew from Deepwood Motte. The letter bears Lady Sibel Glover's seal and Lord Manderly's countersign. Storms have scattered pockets of Euron's survivors along the western shore of the Bight. One longship anchored at Wolfshed 2 nights ago, burned the watchtower and carried off grain and fisherfolk before retreating with the tide. Another group, perhaps 50 men, was seen traveling inland toward the Wolf's Wood. Trackers lost them in whiteout squalls. Jon's jaw clenched. "My people starve come winter proper. We cannot allow raiders to strip stores." Davos scowled. 50 men may not sack a holdfast alone, but what if they seek to meet another band slipping past our nets? Crows I might still have claws. Daenerys felt a chill precise and surgical, distinct from the ambient cold. 50 men with the will of one demon can still carve out fear enough to cripple the north, she said. "We will hunt them." Yora bowed slightly. "Give me 24 Dothraki and a pair of unsullied scouts," he offered. "We'll run them down before they reach the foothills." Jon folded arms across leather jerkin. "I'll send 10 rangers from Castle Black, men who know every tree between the gorge and the shivering sea. Better still, I ride with them." Sansa's eyes flashed. "You are lord of Winterfell's armies, Jon. Your place is here." "Place is where blade meets threat," he answered, voice steady. "If the raiders split, if they take hostages, we need someone trusted to parley, to weigh steel against mercy." And He hesitated, glancing at Daenerys. "And the men may follow faster if they see we stand shoulder to shoulder." A hush settled, broken only by pop of pitch on hearth logs. Daenerys studied him. The set of his mouth, the resolve, the shadow of something that might be shame or hope curling under calm. He stood as though braced against some unseen gale, stubborn enough to hold ground yet aware ground itself might shift beneath boots. "Very well," she said. "Lead them, but take Ravenstorm with you." Jon frowned. "Ravenstorm? My new Swiftwing," she explained. "A yearling hatchling I left roving the narrow sea. He is smaller than Drogon but fierce, and he obeys my summons. I will call him to shadow your route." She raised a brow. "If raiders flee, their terror of a dark sky will outpace their hunger." Jon's eyes widened. Surprise, perhaps awe, perhaps calculation. He inclined his head. "I would be honored." "Honor the dragon by keeping him alive," Barristan murmured, and the hall rippled with quiet laughter that shaved the edge of tension. Sansa unrolled a second parchment. "Third matter. Lord Yohn Royce rides from the Eyrie with 200 knights. He asks safe passage through the neck, claiming he will reinforce Winterfell and swear fealty to the Queen." She nodded toward Daenerys. "Provided the Vale's grain shipments are protected from foreign plunderers." His words. Asha barked a laugh. "Meaning Ironborn or Dothraki, both where foreign smells." "Let him cross," Daenerys said. "But remind him the sky belongs to dragons. I do not plunder grain. I roast ships that would." Jon half smiled. "Lord Royce is proud. Better we welcome him before the first snowpack seals moat Kaelin Pass." Maester Wolkin scribbled notes. Arya slid off the dais, sheathing needle. "I can ride south with a dozen scouts," she offered. "Meet him at the Broken Branch Bridge. Guide him here." "He likes courtesy, that one." Davos lifted both brows. "Can his courtesy stomach umber ale? Because that's all we can spare come frost." The chatter rose, allocation of oats, which towers to billet Vale knights, whether axe halves of weirwood would splinter in Dothraki fists. Daenerys listened, contributing where necessary, but her thoughts pulsed toward darker currents. Somewhere beyond Deepwood Motte, men loyal to Euron still lurked, perhaps nursing shards of dream that Kraken God would rise anew. And deeper still, beneath Skagos' collapsed cavern, she sensed a quiet no mortal could hear, the silence left by broken horn. Magic disliked vacancies. The world's old bones might soon shift again to fill that hush. When council adjourned, candles guttering in spent pools, Jon fell into step beside her as she strode toward the yawning doorway that opened onto the night-battered courtyard. Torches framed drifting snow like golden moths. "My queen," he began, voice almost shy. "I meant what I said. Riding north of the Wolfswood, we will leave sign for Ravenstorm. But I would ask something in return." She turned, lifting her gaze to meet his. His eyes were a storm in quiet harbor. "Ask. When the raiders are dealt with," he said, "ride the wall with me. You have tasted war in sand, sea, sky. Yet the wall holds a different kind of silence. After all that has happened, the men who remain there need to see more than darkness." He paused. "They need to see purpose. Do you believe I can give them that?" she asked. "I believe purpose is what you breathe," he said simply. "Fire needs to see its reflection in ice, or it forgets why it burns." A faint smile tugged one corner of his mouth. "And I think perhaps ice needs that reflection too." A stillness stretched between them, heavy, not uncomfortable. She felt Drogon's distant rumble, a lazy shift of wings atop the rookery spire. He sensed her thoughts. She sensed his. A flicker of curiosity, scent of distant aurora, memory of Skagos' cold fire. She imagined the white immensity of the wall glittering under moonlight, remembered tales of ancient shadows that once walked beyond it. "I will ride," she said. "When you call." Jon nodded, gratitude flickering then shuddering behind composure. "Sleep then, your grace. Tomorrow brings hoofbeats enough for 10 winters." He turned to leave, boots crunching frost near the threshold. Daenerys watched, the tails of his dark cloak lilting behind. For an instant she imagined tucking her hand into the crook of his arm, matching step for step. But she remained still. Above, through the lattice of rafters and smoke, she glimpsed a sliver of moon crowned by northern lights, pale green and violet streamers unfurling soundlessly, fire dancing with ice. She drew a breath, felt tendrils of warm smoke curl in her lungs, and exhaled slowly. Dawn pried open the sky with a blade of bone-white light. Outside Winterfell, the plain shimmered under brittle frost, each grass blade encased in glassy sheath that snapped beneath the tread of unsullied boots. From the ramparts, Daenerys heard the distant drumbeat of hooves long before towers spotted the first outrider. A solitary rider whose curved arack glittered like sunrise as he coaxed his gray mare into a rearing salute, bells braided in his hair tinkling crisp as icicles. Behind him a wave of riders unfolded, hundreds at first, then thousands, brown and black horses churning the frost to powder. They advanced at a trot, a silent tidal hum save for the bells and the creak of leather harness. Drogon led, hair drawn high, scars of whipscrawls pale across tan cheek. A heavy fur, pale as lynx hide, draped his shoulders, gift from some southern lord no doubt parted from his coat with haste. When he reached the shadow of Winterfell's gatehouse, he dismounted with fluid grace, boots crunching in the road slush, his eyes sharp, amber, lifted to Daenerys where she stood between Merlin's. He raised both hands, palms outward, a sign of fealty. "Khaleesi," he called in guttural common tongue. "Blood of my blood returns. Your Khalasar rides, swift as wind, hungrier than winter ghosts." His breath steamed. Daenerys descended stone stairs into the gate tunnel where Jon, Sansa, Yora, and Grey Worm waited. Unsullied parted ranks. 3 direwolves, Nymeria, Grey Wind's orphaned broodmate Fennel, and Ghost, his pelt white as snowdrift, prowled along the inner wall, hackles half-raised but curious. The wolves scented horse musk on the wind and snorted. Daenerys stepped into morning glare beyond the portcullis. Drogon went to one knee, fist to chest. She placed her palm upon his shoulder, felt tension ease beneath sinew. "Rise, Drogon. Welcome to the north." He rose and glanced at the direwolves warily. "You ride bigger dogs now, Khaleesi." She smiled. "They are wolves. They guard my allies as fiercely as Dothraki guard their call." She turned to gesture at Jon, who advanced. "This is Jon Snow, who holds Winterfell in trust." Drogon studied him, then grinned. "Snow rides the world. We ride snows today." He laughed, a bright bray that startled sparrows from the parapet. Sansa greeted warriors with measured courtesy, offering hot barley cakes and mulled beer. More riders poured in, Moro, Rakaro, Kono, dozens she recalled from distant nights along Slaver's Bay, still bearing her mark upon spear shafts. They bore gifts, sacks of spiced mare jerky, lacquered bows carved from unknown timber, bundles of striped pelts. Drogon presented a sealed scroll as well, cracked wax shaped like a black pyramid. Beneath, in fluid Giscari letters, was the signature of Missandei. "We hold Meereen under the banner of the broken chain," it read. "Volantis sues for truce. Yunkai festers. We watch horn fragments wash ashore, but they sing no longer. The old man says, 'Guard your skies.'" Daenerys swallowed, slip folding beneath fingers. Old man, graybeard of the shave pate, perhaps, or her Ben Plum. Either way, warning seldom traveled so far to peddle lies. The day became a tapestry of logistics. Corralling horses into paddocks raked of buried nails, doling oats from Wintertown granaries, quartering riders in outer Bailey longhouses thick with straw. Drogon boasted their numbers: 8,000 riders, 500 wagons of spoils. Many wives, children, goats, sheep, and fowl trailed days behind. They would camp south of the Wolfswood under guard of Khal Pono's scouts. The north, unused to such tide, stretched like leather under new stitching, but did not rip. Dire wolves sniffed Dothraki ponies. Northern hounds snapped, retreated. Jon convened his rangers by the Godswood, drawing maps in frost with the butt of Longclaw. Yora translated Dothraki tongues swiftly, Grey Worm paired unsullied spear companies with umber woodsmen to march tomorrow at dawn, fanning northwest along the coast to squeeze raiders against the sea. Barristan walked among them, correcting stances, praising shield walls. Daenerys moved like ember through snow, lending presence where fear flickered. A word here, a smile there, her dark cloak swirling like a crow's wing. But in the late afternoon, as sun sank and a bleak wind rose from the east, a horn blast rolled across fields, one peal only drawn and trembling. It came from the eastern watchfires beyond the King's Road. Soldiers halted, eyes widening. The blast repeated, two notes mournful. Dothraki murmured, gripping reins. A third blast cut the air shrill, long, ending in a raw wail that rattled the teeth of every man who heard it. Not Dragonbinder, not any crafted horn of bronze. This was an ancient timber horn kept by the Night's Watch to signal riders beyond the wall 3 blasts. White Walkers. Yet the wall lay more than 100 leagues north. How could that note echo here? Jon emerged from the Godswood path, face pale. Who sounded that horn? He barked. Rangers looked at one another. No man, declared a gray-haired sergeant. The horn at Eastfire Tower is lashed to the rafters. Cannot be reached without ladder. Jon strode to Daenerys, voice hushed. South wind carried sound. It may come from as far as the broken branch. But 3 blasts. We have not used that call in years. Daenerys felt Drogon's answering rumble resonate like iron striking soul. He launched from the rookery in a gust of wings, circling above the rooftops. Ravenstorm, smaller and swifter, burst from the southern horizon, having felt the summons of her mind before any word was spoken. His scales shimmered obsidian with a film of hoarfrost gathered on the flight. He keened a sharp note of alarm. She closed her eyes, reached for Ravenstorm's senses. Air tasted of salt, but wrong stale. Wind carried a chill deeper than ocean fog. Beneath, she glimpsed a dark smear along the King's Road. A line of stunted trees drooping under ice not native to autumn. Their leaves rhymed white despite unbroken branches. It is not walkers, she murmured, vision mixing with Ravenstorm's. It is horn echoes trapped in frost. Magic churns yet. Jon's brow creased. Euron is dead. Yes, she said, but his dream opened cracks. The world heals slow. She opened eyes. Snow began again, heavier, swirling in short, angry gusts. The wind had shifted from northeast now from the shivering sea. Far off in that direction lay Skagos' jagged silhouette. Prepare the dragons, she said, her voice cut through the gathering hush. We fly east at dusk. Follow the horn's ghost. Jogo stepped near. Blood of my blood. Riders will follow beneath. She shook head. Speed is our shield. This night only wings matter. She turned to Jon. Hold Winterfell. Barristan, you ride with me. No, Jon said quietly. If you face a horn's shadow again, you will need eyes that know this land's secrets. Let me fly with you. His gaze met hers. Not pride, but unwavering purpose. Same steadiness that drew men to trust him at the world's bitter edges. She nodded once. Find furs warm enough. Meet me at the tree line beyond the palisade before moonrise. Barristan opened his mouth, then closed it, bowing. My queen, I will hold command here. The last glow of sunset bled away as Daenerys ascended Drogon's shoulder in the meadow east of Winterfell. Jon stood ready, cloaked in direwolf-trimmed fur, Longclaw strapped across broad back. Ravenstorm settled on a boulder nearby, restless claws scoring lichen. You know how to sit a saddle? She asked over the wind. I've ridden worse, he replied, half smiling. He swung up behind her, hands light upon the ridge. Drogon chuffed, nostrils fuming. With a beat of vast wings they rose, Ravenstorm leaping ahead in darting spiral. The last lamps of Winterfell flickered beneath like distant stars, and the call of horns faded into hush. Northward, a curtain of storm clouds boomed with pale flashes. Lightning silent within thick snow, they banked, gliding into the maw. Higher they climbed, the air thin and harsh, until clouds swallowed ground entirely. Snow whipped around them in blinding shards, yet Drogon's heat carved a tunnel, steam billowing. In that cocoon of fire and frost, Daenerys felt Jon lean ever so slightly forward, body following the dragon's pitch, trust absolute. An hour passed, or a lifetime. Then Ravenstorm shrieked, a note of dread. The clouds before them parted to reveal a gulf of swirling ice, a furious vortex hammered by unseen force. At its heart hovered an object so black it seemed to drain starlight. A shard of horn? No, too large, too irregular. It revolved slowly, encased in frozen mist that glowed with sickly blue veins. Jon swore, "What in seven hells?" Sound blossomed, deep, low, a howl of wind forced through cavern throat. It vibrated Drogon's ribs beneath them, not crafted by mortal hand, yet akin to horn. Daenerys reached, felt edges of melody gnaw at bond, but her new forged lens inside heart refracted threat. Drogon's will held firm. She fixed eyes upon that black object, stone perhaps, or ice fused with obsidian. It pulsed once, and from cracks burst a cluster of luminous motes that spiraled outward like embers sucking breath from the storm. Only they were not embers, they were shapes. Small, winged, translucent as winter glass. Dragons? No, something else. Wraiths of frost. Their forms flickered and blurred, each no larger than a crow. They darted as if curious, swirling around Drogon, leaving streaks of rime upon his scales. Jon swung Longclaw, slicing one. The blade met no flesh. The shape vanished like breath, but Longclaw's edge crusted instantly with ice so cold it steamed. Jon shook the sword, shards tinkling into the abyss. "We break the heart," Daenerys shouted over the wind. She urged Drogon into steep dive toward the black mass. Ravenstorm followed, flame streaming from jaws. White wraiths shrieked, coalescing into a swirling shield. Drogon breathed. A torrent of incandescent orange spouted, colliding with swirling cold. Steam exploded, curtain of fog hiding everything. They plunged through, wings buffeted by arcs of frozen debris clanging off scale. The black object loomed, jagged, large as a megalith, its surface rippling with blue cracks. As they neared, runes swam across its face, shapes hauntingly similar to those on Dragonbinder, yet twisted, as though scrawled by blind ice. Daenerys drew breath, feeling fire gather in her own chest mirrored in Drogon's. She let the bond open wider than ever before, a doorway flung off hinges. Heat roared into the dragon, flame building beyond natural capacity. Drogon's throat glowed red through scale edges. Now she willed. Fire erupted, not stream, but sphere. A sun coughed forth, shattering the wraith swarm. The black monolith cracked, blue fissures splintering into spider webs. Amid the shriek of rending stone, a core of pale radiance burst outward. An echo of the horn's cry multiplied 1,000-fold. Jon pressed forehead against her shoulder to muffle the roar, arms braced around her waist. Then silence. Storm clouds sucked inward, collapsing like lungs exhaling death. The monolith crumbled, shards raining into darkness. Lightning receded, leaving black sky pricked with stars. Wind steadied to gentle hush. Ravenstorm wheeled beside them, chirping curiosity. Frost wraiths dissipated like chaff. Drogon hovered, wings beating slow. Daenerys inhaled, lungs burning, tasting soot and snow. Below, the land unfurled in moonlit quilt. White pines, frozen rivers, scattered campfires of unknown travelers. The broken crater where Monolith had hung now held only drifting frost, curling like feathers. Jon exhaled ragged breath. "Is it over? For tonight," she whispered. Tremor slid through her limbs after fire. Some power sought to fill the silence left by Euron's horn. "We have shattered it. But the world remembers magic now. It will keep birthing new shapes until men choose, to craft them or to guard against them." She turned slightly to meet his gaze, wind lashing stray hair across her cheeks. "We must be wardens as much as rulers." Jon nodded, eyes reflecting starlight. Below, The horizon lightened with first hints of dawn, a smear of silver against indigo. The storm dispersed, leaving calm so profound Daenerys could hear the faint rush of Drogon's breath, the softer flutter of Ravenstorm's wings, and beneath that, the steady rhythm of Jon's heart against her back. "We fly home," she said. "Winterfell needs our tale." They banked west, leaving broken frost to mend itself beneath indifferent heavens. Behind them, a single shard of the monument drifted, glowing until it met open air, then shattering in glitter of snow so fine it became indistinguishable from the stars. 3 nights later, fires blazed in Winterfell's yard, but not of dread. A feast of alliance, of riders and rangers returned victorious. Yora's band had cornered Euron's survivors near the tin mines, freeing hostages and hanging the worst upon ironwood branches as warning. No further horns had sounded. Snow, though heavier, fell gentle, as though world exhaled. Inside the great hall, mead sloshed, drums thumped Dothraki crescendos beneath northern fiddles. Children laughed, chasing ghostly wolf pups darting under benches. Above it all, Sansa rose to speak, goblet raised. Silence rippled outward. "We have seen dragons ride blizzard skies," she declared. "We have seen the old songs wake. But fear will not rule this house." She turned to Daenerys, seated beside Jon on the dais, Drogon's silhouette cast on wall behind from roaring hearth. "The North offers its fires to your flame, your grace. We ask that you in turn share with us the warmth of your promise, that no horn, no chain, no terror of sea or shadow shall bind us again." Daenerys felt all eyes. She rose, cloak swirling. She sensed Drogon outside, perched upon the broken tower, feeling his watchful pride. "I promise," she said, voice carrying. "The realm I build is not one of collars. It is one of wings." She glanced at Jon, and something unspoken flowed between them, recognition of paths converging. "Together we will guard the dusk so dawn may grow." Cheer erupted, a rolling thunder of tankards against tables, of Iraq's beating shields. In the triumph, Arya vaulted again onto a bench, brandishing a ladle-like sword, chanting "Dawn, dawn, dawn," until wolves howled along. Later, when laughter ebbed and torches guttered low, Daenerys walked the ramparts alone. Jon joined her, cloak around shoulders. Below, ice-reflected moonlight so bright it seemed a lake of ghosts. He spoke first. "Tomorrow I ride east to finish the hunt, ensure no raider souls linger. After, I will honor my pledge. I will ride the wall with you." She studied the horizon where faint aurora smeared. "And after the wall?" He set hands upon the stone. "There will be harvests to guard, kingdoms to speak for themselves. A queen may need a voice familiar with snows and summers alike." Her smile was soft, unsure. "And a voice may need a queen who listens." Wind carried scent of pine and distant smoke. He turned. She did as well, their faces close. Without rush, with the deliberateness of oaths sealed in blood, they kissed. A brush first, tentative, then a meeting sure as steel. Her hand rose to his cheek, warm despite cold. His found the curve of her neck. Drogon rumbled approval somewhere beyond, low and amused. They separated, breath mingling. "In the tales," he murmured. "Dragons and wolves seldom lie side by side. We shall write new tales," she said. He nodded, and together they looked north where black sky met pale land, and the first glow of sun began to edge the rim, pink as a promise, bright as a beginning that no horn, no chain, no kraken, no frost wraith could silence. Tomorrow would demand steel, will, and 1,000 small mercies. But tonight, for a heartbeat frozen perfect in snow-quiet moon, dawn waited its turn, and 2 hearts kept its secret.